The grand piano sat like a silent king in the marble atrium of Pinnacle Enterprises, its polished ebony gleaming under the chandelier's cascade of light. The annual gala was in full swing, a glittering affair of New York's elite suits crisp, dresses flowing, champagne flutes clinking in a symphony of privilege. But the air turned brittle when Ethan Caldwell, the 42-year-old CEO of Pinnacle, leaned over the piano, his smirk sharp as a blade, and pointed at Marcus Tate, the janitor. Marcus, a wiry black man in his late 50s, was wiping down a nearby table, his gray uniform blending into the shadows of the opulent room. "Play Chopin, and I'll marry you," Caldwell sneered, his voice loud enough to slice through the chatter. Laughter erupted from the crowd, a cruel chorus that echoed off the high ceilings. Marcus froze, his rag dangling from his hand. The words weren't just a taunt. They were a gauntlet, thrown with the weight of centuries of disdain. Caldwell's eyes glinted with mockery, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Marcus's worn uniform. The CEO leaned closer, his breath tinged with bourbon. "What's the matter, janitor? Can't handle a little nocturne?" The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Marcus to shrink, to retreat into the invisibility his job demanded. But Marcus's eyes, deep and steady, met Caldwell's. He didn't flinch. Instead, he set the rag down with deliberate care, his movement slow, almost ceremonial. The crowd's laughter faded into uneasy murmurs as Marcus stepped toward the piano. His shoes, scuffed but polished, clicked softly against the marble. He sat at the bench, his calloused hands hovering over the keys. The silence was deafening. Marcus's fingers touched the keys, and the first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major spilled into the room. The melody was soft at first, like a whisper, but it carried a weight that made the air tremble. Each note was precise, deliberate, a defiance woven into sound. Caldwell's smirk faltered. The crowd, expecting a fumbling attempt, stood stunned as Marcus's hands moved with a grace that belied his worn appearance. His eyes closed, and the music swelled, filling the atrium with a haunting beauty that seemed to pull the room's oxygen into its orbit. He wasn't just playing. He was telling a story. The notes spoke of nights spent practicing on a battered upright in a cramped Harlem apartment, of dreams buried under years of labor, of a life where music was both salvation and sacrifice. Marcus had studied at Juilliard decades ago, a scholarship kid with a gift that burned bright until life, and the world's unspoken rules pushed him to the margins. Now, those same hands that scrubbed floors conjured a nocturne that held the room captive. Caldwell's face hardened. He hadn't expected this. The crowd, too, shifted uncomfortably, their earlier laughter now a bitter memory. Marcus's playing wasn't just skillful, it was a rebuke, a quiet storm that exposed the fragility of their assumptions. As the final notes lingered, a single tear traced down Marcus's cheek, unnoticed by most but caught by the light. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the chandelier. Then Caldwell clapped, slow and deliberate, breaking the spell. "Not bad, janitor," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But let's see you keep up." He gestured to a string quartet in the corner, signaling them to join in. The challenge was clear. This wasn't over. Caldwell wasn't about to let a janitor steal his spotlight. Marcus didn't respond. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned back to the keys. The quartet began, their strings weaving a complex counterpoint. Marcus listened for a moment. Then his fingers danced again, meeting their tempo, matching their fire. The music became a duel, piano against strings, janitor against CEO, a clash of worlds in a room that had never felt smaller. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were witnessing something raw, something real, a man reclaiming his dignity in notes that cut deeper than words. But Caldwell's eyes burned with something darker. This wasn't just about music anymore. It was about power, and he wasn't ready to lose. As the music crescendoed, Marcus's past began to surface in fragments. He'd been a prodigy once, playing in smoky jazz clubs and concert halls. His name whispered with promise. But a single bad choice alone he couldn't repay. A career derailed by prejudice had sent him spiraling into obscurity. Now, at 58, he was invisible, a man who cleaned up after the powerful. Yet here, in this moment, he was anything but. The quartet faltered, unable to keep pace with Marcus's relentless precision. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of awe and disbelief. Caldwell's jaw tightened. He stepped closer to the piano, his voice low but venomous. "You think you're special. You're still just the help." Marcus didn't look up. His fingers flew faster, the music a shield and a sword. The nocturne morphed into something new, a fusion of Chopin's elegance and the raw pulse of jazz, a sound that was unmistakably his. The room was no longer Pinnacle's atrium, it was Marcus's stage. And every note was a declaration: I am here. I am enough. Caldwell's sneer returned, but it was strained. He clapped again, louder this time, trying to reclaim control. "Enough," he barked, signaling the quartet to stop. The music died abruptly, leaving a void that felt like a wound. Marcus's hands stilled, but he didn't move from the bench. The crowd waited, breathless, for what would come next. The silence in the atrium was a living thing, heavy and taut, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Marcus sat at the piano, his hands resting lightly on the keys, his gaze steady despite the weight of Ethan Caldwell's stare. The CEO's words, "You're still just the help," hung in the air like smoke, curling around the chandeliers and settling into the crowd's uneasy murmurs. But Marcus didn't flinch. His silence was louder than Caldwell's taunt, a quiet defiance that seemed to shift the room's gravity. Caldwell paced a slow circle around the piano, his polished shoes clicking like a metronome. "You've got some nerve," he said, his voice a low growl meant for Marcus alone. "Thinking you can waltz in here and make a fool of me." He stopped, leaning against the piano's curve, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm. "This isn't your stage, Janitor. It's mine." Marcus's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but something close a flicker of resolve. "I'm not here to take anything," he said softly, his voice steady, carrying the faint lilt of a Harlem childhood. "I'm just playing the music you asked for." The simplicity of his words cut deeper than any retort could. The crowd shifted, some leaning forward, others glancing away, as if caught eavesdropping on a private war. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like Marcus. Pinnacle Enterprises was his empire, built on tech innovations and ruthless ambition. At 42, he was a titan, his name synonymous with power in New York's corporate world. But power is fragile when it's built on belittling others, and Marcus's music had cracked that foundation. "Let's raise the stakes," Caldwell said, his voice rising to address the room. He turned to the crowd, his charm snapping back into place like a mask. "This man thinks he's a musician. Fine. Let's see how he handles something real." He gestured to a young woman in a crimson gown, her violin case resting by her side. "Elena, play him something he can't follow. Something virtuosic." Elena Martinez, a rising star in the classical world, hesitated. Her dark eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Caldwell. She was 26, ambitious, and acutely aware of the power dynamics in the room. Caldwell was a patron, a man whose influence could open doors or slam them shut. But there was something in Marcus's posture, the quiet dignity in his weathered hands, that made her pause. She stepped forward, her violin gleaming under the lights. "Paganini," she said, her voice clear but cautious. "Caprice no? 24. The crowd murmured. Paganini's caprices were notorious, a test of technical precision and emotional fire. It was a gauntlet, one even seasoned pianists would struggle to match. Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'll follow," he said simply. Elena raised her violin, the bow trembling slightly as she began. The notes were a cascade, sharp and relentless, each phrase a dare. Marcus listened for a moment, his head tilted. Then his fingers moved. He didn't mimic her, he answered her, weaving a piano accompaniment that danced with her melody, sometimes echoing, sometimes challenging. The music was a conversation, not a competition, and it was breathtaking. The crowd was transfixed. Elena's playing grew bolder, her notes soaring with a passion she hadn't expected to feel. Marcus matched her, his hands a blur, the piano singing with a warmth that grounded her fire. For a moment, they were equals, two musicians lost in the language of sound. The room faded the chandeliers, the champagne, Caldwell's looming presence until it was just them and the music. Caldwell's jaw tightened. He hadn't anticipated this. The janitor wasn't just keeping up. He was stealing the show. The crowd's applause, when it came, was thunderous, a wave that drowned out his attempts to regain control. Elena lowered her violin, her chest heaving, and looked at Marcus with something like respect. "You're good," she said, almost a whisper. Marcus dipped his head, a small gesture of acknowledgement. "You too," he replied. The simplicity of it, the lack of arrogance, only deepened the crowd's admiration. But Caldwell wasn't done. He stepped between them, his smile cold. "Cute," he said. "But this isn't a recital. You're here to clean, not play." The words stung, but Marcus didn't react. Instead, he stood, his movements slow and deliberate, and picked up his rag from the table. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of indignation and discomfort. They'd seen something extraordinary, and Caldwell's dismissal felt petty, small. But Marcus didn't argue. He simply walked back to his cleaning cart, his head high, and resumed wiping down a table. The gala continued, but the energy had shifted. Guests whispered about the janitor who played like a maestro, about the CEO who tried to humiliate him and failed. Caldwell felt its subtle erosion of his authority. He forced a laugh, raising his glass to the crowd. "To entertainment," he called, but the toast felt hollow. Behind the scenes, Marcus's life was a tapestry of struggle and resilience. Born in Harlem in the late 1960s, he'd grown up in a world where music was both escape and defiance. His mother, a schoolteacher, had saved for years to buy him a second-hand piano, her belief in his talent unwavering. Juilliard had been a dream realized, but the world beyond its walls was less forgiving. A bad loan, a string of rejections, and the slow grind of systemic bias had pushed him into jobs that paid the bills but dimmed his light. Now, at Pinnacle, he was invisible until tonight. As Marcus pushed his cart toward the service elevator, Elena caught up with him. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, her voice low. "You could have told him who you are." Marcus smiled faintly. "He didn't ask," he said. "And sometimes, it's not about words. It's about what you do." Elena watched him go, her violin case heavy in her hand. She'd come to the gala hoping to impress Caldwell, to secure a sponsorship. But now, she wasn't so sure. There was something about Marcus's quiet strength, his refusal to bend that made her question the game she was playing. Back in the atrium, Caldwell was already plotting his next move. He couldn't let this go. The janitor had humiliated him, and in his world, that was unforgivable. He leaned toward his assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, and whispered, "Find out everything you can about him." "Everything." Claire nodded, her tablet already glowing with notes. She'd seen the way Marcus played, the way the crowd responded. And she knew Caldwell well enough to understand that this wasn't about music anymore. It was about control, and he'd do whatever it took to win. The gala's lights dimmed as the night wore on, but the tension in Pinnacle Enterprises' atrium lingered like a storm cloud. Marcus Tate pushed his cleaning cart through the service corridors, the hum of the gala fading behind him. His hands, still warm from the piano keys, gripped the cart's handle with a steadiness that belied the chaos of the evening. He'd played Chopin, matched a virtuoso, and turned Ethan Caldwell's mockery into a moment of triumph. But he knew better than to think it was over. Men like Caldwell didn't let go of slights, they doubled down. In the executive suite upstairs, Caldwell sat behind his glass desk, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm. Claire, his assistant, stood before him, her tablet glowing with information she'd pulled in record time. "Marcus Tate, 58, she said, her voice crisp. "Born in Harlem. Juilliard, full scholarship, graduated with honors in 1989. Toured briefly in the early 90s jazz clubs, some classical venues. Then it gets patchy. A bankruptcy filing in 95, a few odd jobs, and he's been a janitor here for the last 8 years. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "Juilliard," he muttered, leaning back in his chair. The word tasted bitter. He'd expected a nobody, a man whose life could be dismissed with a sneer. But Marcus wasn't just a janitor, was a ghost of something greater, a reminder of what Caldwell could never claim: raw, unbuyable talent. "Why's he cleaning floors if he's so gifted?" Caldwell asked, his tone mocking but curious. Claire hesitated. The bankruptcy was tied to a bad lonesome music academy he tried to start. Got tangled in legal issues. Lost everything. There's also whispers of blackballing in the music world. Nothing concrete, but he stopped getting gigs after 95. Caldwell smirked, sensing an opening. A failure. Then. Perfect. He stood, pacing to the window overlooking the city's glittering skyline. "I want him gone. Make it clean insubordination. Theft. Whatever sticks. He's not embarrassing me again." Claire's lips tightened, but she nodded. She'd worked for Caldwell long enough to know his ruthlessness, but something about Marcus's performance had stirred her. She'd grown up in Brooklyn, scraping by, and she recognized the weight of a system that crushed people like Marcus. Still, she had a job to do. Downstairs, Marcus was back in the atrium, mopping the marble floor where the crowd had thinned. The piano stood silent now, a monument to the night's battle. Elena Martinez lingered nearby, her crimson gown a splash of color against the pale stone. She approached him, her steps hesitant. "You didn't just play tonight," she said. You made us all feel something. Why are you here, doing this?" Marcus paused, leaning on his mop. His eyes, deep and weathered, met hers. "Life doesn't always give you a stage," he said. "Sometimes, you make your own. Tonight was mine." His voice was quiet, but carried a weight that made Elena's chest tighten. She wanted to say more, but a security guard appeared, his expression grim. "Mr. Tate," the guard said, his tone formal. "You're needed in HR. Now." Marcus's face didn't change. but a flicker of understanding passed through his eyes. He set the mop against the cart and followed the guard. His steps measured. Elena watched him go, a knot forming in her stomach. She'd seen Caldwell's type before, men who wielded power like a weapon. She slipped her phone from her clutch and began typing, her fingers moving with purpose. In the HR office, a stern woman named Diane sat across from Marcus, her desk cluttered with files. "We've had a complaint," she said, avoiding his gaze. "You were seen taking items from the gala bottles. Linens. Theft is grounds for immediate termination." Marcus's brow furrowed. "I haven't taken anything," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You can check my cart, my locker, anything." Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. "There's also insubordination. You disrupted the gala with an unauthorized performance." "Unauthorized?" Marcus's voice sharpened, just slightly. "Mr. Caldwell asked me to play." The whole room heard it. Diane shifted uncomfortably. "That's not the report we received." "I'm sorry, Marcus, but this comes from the top." Marcus leaned back, his hands folded. He'd faced moments like this before, doors slammed shut, accusations thrown to keep him in his place. But he wasn't the young man who'd crumbled under pressure decades ago. "I'd like to see the evidence," he said. "And I'd like to speak to Mr. Caldwell directly." Diane's eyes widened. "That's not how this works." "Maybe it should be," Marcus replied, his voice steady as stone. Meanwhile, Elena had found a quiet corner and uploaded a video to X, a shaky clip she'd recorded during Marcus's performance, capturing his hands flying over the keys, Caldwell's sneer, and the crowd's stunned faces. Her caption was simple: "This man deserves better than their mockery." Pinnacle Gala. She hit post, her heart racing. She didn't know Marcus's story, but she knew injustice when she saw it. By morning, the video was spreading. Posts on X lit up with reactions, some calling Marcus a hidden genius, others decrying Caldwell's behavior as blatant prejudice. The hashtag Pinnacle Gala trended, drawing attention from local music blogs to national outlets. A few users dug deeper, unearthing Marcus's Juilliard past and the mysterious end to his career. The narrative was shifting, and Caldwell felt it. In his office, he scrolled through the posts, his face a mask of fury. Claire stood nearby, her tablet clutched tightly. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "The board's asking questions. They want to know why we're firing a man who's gone viral for his talent." Caldwell slammed his hand on the desk. "Then make it go away," he snapped. "Spin it. Say he's unstable, a liability. I don't care how, just fix it." But Claire wasn't so sure. She'd seen the video, seen the comments. The world was watching now, and Marcus wasn't invisible anymore. She glanced at her tablet, where a new message had just pinged a request from a local news outlet for an interview with Marcus. She hesitated, then deleted it before Caldwell could see. Back in the service corridors, Marcus sat alone in the break room, his hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. He didn't have a phone, didn't know about the viral video or the storm brewing online. But he felt the weight of the night, the way the piano had felt like home, the way Caldwell's words had tried to strip it away. He'd been here before, pushed to the edges. But this time, something was different. This time, he wasn't alone. The morning after the gala, Pinnacle Enterprises buzzed with a different kind of energy. The marble atrium, pristine again thanks to Marcus's quiet work, felt like a stage waiting for its next act. Outside, the New York skyline glittered under a cold September sun. But inside, the air was charged with whispers and sideways glances. Marcus Tate, the janitor who'd played Chopin, was no longer just a name on a badge. He was a story, a spark that had ignited something unstoppable. In the employee break room, Marcus sat with his coffee, unaware of the digital storm brewing. His gray uniform was neatly pressed, his face calm but tired. The HR meeting had ended inconclusively. Diane had promised to review his case, but her tone suggested a foregone conclusion. Marcus knew the game. He'd played it before, in music halls and boardrooms, where talent was no match for power. But as he sipped his coffee, a young maintenance worker, Jamal, burst in, phone in hand. "Man, you're everywhere," Jamal said, his voice a mix of awe and urgency. He shoved the phone toward Marcus, the screen glowing with Elena's video. The clip had racked up thousands of views overnight, the comments a flood of support and outrage. Marcus watched himself at the piano, his hands a blur, Caldwell's sneer looming like a shadow. The caption, "This man deserves better than their mockery," hit him like a punch. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted a spotlight. But it was here. "You see this?" Jamal said, scrolling through posts on X. "People are calling you a legend. They're saying Pinnacle's trying to bury you. This ain't just about the gala anymore." Marcus handed the phone back, his expression unreadable. "It's never just about one night," he said quietly. He stood, adjusting his uniform, and headed back to work. But the weight of those words lingered. He'd spent years staying small, staying safe. Now, the world was watching, and he wasn't sure what that meant. Upstairs, Ethan Caldwell's office was a war room. His desk was littered with coffee cups and printouts of X posts, each one stoking his fury. Claire stood by the window, her tablet buzzing with notifications. "The board's getting nervous," she said, her voice measured. "They're worried about PR. The video's been picked up by a few major outlets, CNN, The Times. They're framing it as a race issue. Ethan, CEO humiliates black janitor, isn't a good look." Caldwell's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Race? This isn't about race. It's about a nobody thinking he can challenge me." But his words rang hollow, even to him. He'd built Pinnacle on optics, clean, progressive, untouchable. Now, a janitor had cracked that facade, and the world was noticing. Claire hesitated, then spoke. "We could pivot. Invite him to perform at the next event. Spin it as a discovery story." It'd calm things down. Caldwell's eyes flashed. "You think I'm going to reward him? He's done. Find a way to make it stick today." But Claire wasn't so sure anymore. She'd dug deeper into Marcus's past, found old reviews from his Juilliard days, clips of performances in dive bars and small venues. He wasn't just talented, was extraordinary. A man who'd been silenced by a world that didn't know what to do with him. She glanced at her tablet, where another message waited, a producer from a local TV station, offering Marcus a platform. She didn't delete this one. In the atrium, Marcus was back at his cart, polishing a brass railing. The gala's remnants were gone, but the memory of his performance lingered in the air. Elena appeared, her violin case slung over her shoulder. She'd traded her gown for jeans, but her eyes carried the same intensity. "They're trying to fire you," she said bluntly. "I heard from a friend in HR. Caldwell's pushing hard." Marcus didn't look up, his rag moving in slow, deliberate circles. "Figured as much," he said. "Men like him don't like being shown up." Elena's jaw tightened. "You don't have to take this. That video, it's changing things. People are on your side." Marcus paused, meeting her gaze. "I don't need sides," he said. "I just need to keep going." But Elena wasn't backing down. She'd spent her career navigating rooms like pinnacles, playing by rules that favored men like Caldwell. Marcus's music had reminded her of something. She'd buryed a hunger for something real, something honest. "I'm not letting them bury you," she said. "I've got contacts. We can fight this." Before Marcus could respond, Diane from HR appeared, flanked by 2 security guards. "Marcus, we need you to come with us," she said. Her voice clipped. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Please hand over your badge." The words hit like a slap, but Marcus didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the worn plastic badge, and placed it on the cart. The guard stepped closer, but Marcus raised a hand, calm but firm. "I'll walk myself out," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes held a fire that made Diane look away. As Marcus walked toward the exit, employees stopped to watch. Some whispered. Others stared in silence. Jamal followed at a distance, his phone still recording, capturing the quiet dignity in Marcus's stride. Outside, the city roared, taxis honking, pedestrians rushing, but Marcus stood still for a moment, breathing in the sharp autumn air. He'd lost his job, but he hadn't lost himself. By noon, the story had exploded. Elena's video was everywhere, shared by activists, musicians, and everyday people. A local radio host played a clip of Marcus's performance, calling it a middle finger to the elite. A petition started circulating, demanding Pinnacle reinstate him. And in a small Harlem bar, a group of old musicians, men who'd known Marcus in his Juilliard days, saw the video and began to talk. They hadn't forgotten him. Caldwell, meanwhile, was losing control. His phone buzzed with messages from the board, from investors, from PR firms offering damage control. He scrolled through X, his face paling as he read the latest posts. One, from a prominent civil rights lawyer. Read, "Pinnacle's actions reek of racial bias. We're watching." Another, from a music professor, linked to an old article about Marcus's early career, calling him a genius lost to systemic neglect. Claire knocked on his door, her expression unreadable. "The board wants a meeting," she said. "They're suggesting we bring Marcus back. Maybe even apologize." Caldwell's laugh was brittle. Apologize? To him. But his voice lacked conviction. The room was closing in, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his own arrogance. Marcus, unaware of the chaos, walked the streets of Harlem, his hands in his pockets. He stopped at a small park, where a street musician played a battered saxophone. The notes were raw, imperfect, but they carried a truth Marcus recognized. He sat on a bench, listening, and for the first time that day, he smiled. The fight wasn't over, but he was ready. Harlem streets pulsed with life as Marcus Tate walked past corner stores and murals, the saxophone's wail from the park still echoing in his mind. The city felt like an old friend, its rhythm familiar even after years of struggle. He'd lost his job at Pinnacle, but the weight of that loss was lighter than he'd expected. The music he'd played last night, the way it had silenced the room, had reminded him of who he was: not a janitor, not a failure, but a man whose hands could still speak. Back at Pinnacle Enterprises, Ethan Caldwell's office was a pressure cooker. The board meeting loomed, and the room buzzed with tension. Claire stood by the door, her tablet a shield as she relayed the latest updates. The petition to reinstate Marcus has 10,000 signatures, she said. And a local TV station just aired a segment calling you out by name. They're framing it as a modern-day David and Goliath. Caldwell's face was a mask of controlled fury. David and Goliath. He spat. He's a janitor who got lucky with a piano. This is ridiculous. but his hands trembled as he poured another coffee. The viral video, the hashtags, the articles, they were eroding his carefully curated image. Pinnacle stock had dipped slightly, and investors were whispering about optics. He'd built his empire on control, but Marcus's music had slipped through his fingers like sand. Claire hesitated, then spoke. "There's an opportunity here. Ethan. Bring him back. Make a public gesture, maybe a scholarship in his name. It could turn this around." Caldwell's eyes flashed. "You're joking." "I'm not groveling to him." But the words lacked their usual bite. He knew the board was watching, and they weren't as loyal as he'd like. He needed a way out, a way to reclaim the narrative without bending. Meanwhile, Elena Martinez was moving fast. She'd spent the morning reaching out to contacts, musicians, journalists, even a former professor from Juilliard who remembered Marcus. She sat in a coffee shop, her laptop open, drafting an open letter to Pinnacle's board. "Marcus Tate is not just an employee," she wrote. "He's a reminder that talent doesn't care about status or skin color. Firing him was a mistake. Ignoring him now is a choice." She posted it to X, tagging every major outlet she could think of. Within hours, it was shared thousands of times. The hashtag Justice for Marcus trending alongside Pinnacle Gala. In Harlem, Marcus stopped at a small music shop, its windows filled with dusty instruments. The owner, an older man named Ray, recognized him instantly. "Marcus Tate," Ray said, his face breaking into a grin. "Saw you on the news. Man, you lit that place up." Ray had been a drummer in the 80s, part of the same jazz scene Marcus had once ruled. They'd played together in smoky clubs, dreaming of bigger stages. "Didn't expect to be news," Marcus said, his voice quiet. He ran a hand over a used keyboard in the corner, its keys yellowed but warm. "Just wanted to play?" Ray leaned closer, his eyes sharp. "You did more than play. You showed him who you are. And now they're scared." He pulled out his phone, showing Marcus the latest posts, a mix of support from strangers and calls for Pinnacle to answer for its actions. "This ain't just about you anymore. It's about all of us." Marcus nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered the nights after Juilliard, when the rejections piled up, when promoters stopped calling, when the world seemed to say he didn't belong. He'd fought then, and he'd fight now. But how? He wasn't on X, didn't have a platform. All he had was his music, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. By afternoon, the story had reached a tipping point. A local news crew arrived at Pinnacle, cameras rolling as they demanded a statement. The board, sensing a PR disaster, called an emergency meeting. Caldwell stood at the head of the table, his charm strained as he faced a dozen skeptical faces. "This is being blown out of proportion," he said. The man was fired for cause insubordination, disruption. "We can't let social media dictate our policies." But the board wasn't buying it. A silver-haired woman named Margaret, a longtime director, leaned forward. "Ethan, this isn't about policy. It's about perception. The public sees a black man humiliated, then fired, for daring to be exceptional. We can't ignore that." Caldwell's jaw clenched. "So what? We bring him back and make him a mascot. That's weakness." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "It's strategy. And it's the right thing to do." As the meeting dragged on, Marcus was back in Harlem, sitting at the keyboard in Ray's shop. He played softly, a melody that wove Chopin with the blues, a sound that was both mourning and defiance. Ray watched, nodding. "That's it, man," he said. "That's your voice. Don't let him take it." The door chimed, and Elena walked in, her face lit with purpose. "Marcus," she said, breathless. "The news wants to talk to you. And there's a group musicians, activist theory planning a concert in your name. They want you to play." Marcus's hands stilled on the keys. A concert. A stage. The thought stirred something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Sharp and dangerous. "I don't know," he said. "I'm not looking to be a symbol." "You already are," Elena replied. "Not because you asked for it, but because you showed up. You played. You made them see you." Marcus looked at her, then at Ray, who nodded. The weight of the moment settled on him, not just his fight, but the fight of everyone who'd been pushed aside, dismissed, forgotten. He took a breath, his fingers brushing the keys. "All right," he said. "I'll play." That evening, Pinnacle issued a statement, carefully worded. "We are reviewing the circumstances surrounding Marcus Tate's termination and are committed to fairness." It was a stall, a way to buy time, but the public wasn't appeased. Ex-posts demanded more reinstate Marcus. Apologize. The pressure was mounting, and Caldwell felt it like a noose. In his office, he watched the news coverage, his hands clenched. Claire stood nearby, her expression unreadable. "You can still fix this," she said. "But you have to move fast." Caldwell didn't respond. He was thinking of Marcus, of the piano, of the way the room had turned against him. For the first time, he wondered if he'd miscalculated. But he wasn't ready to admit defeat, not yet. In Harlem, Marcus sat at the keyboard, playing into the night. The music was his anchor, his truth. Whatever came next, he'd face it the only way he knew how, with his hands on the keys, telling a story the world couldn't ignore. The Harlem Music Shop was a sanctuary, its walls lined with vinyl records and faded posters of jazz legends. Marcus Tate sat at the keyboard, his fingers weaving a melody that blended Chopin's elegance with the raw pulse of the streets. The notes carried the weight of his life triumphs, losses, and now this unexpected spotlight. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. But inside, with Ray and Elena watching, Marcus felt a clarity he hadn't known in years. He'd play, not for fame or revenge, but for himself. Across town, Pinnacle Enterprises was unraveling. Ethan Caldwell paced his office, the city's skyline a mocking backdrop to his crumbling control. The board's pressure was relentless. Margaret had called twice, urging a public apology. The ex-posts were merciless, with Justice for Marcus now trending nationally. A viral thread had unearthed more of Marcus's past, a glowing 1990 review calling him a pianist with a soul that speaks. The narrative was no longer just about a gala gone wrong. It was about a system that had buried a black man's talent for decades. Claire, ever the pragmatist, laid out the options. "You can fight this and lose more ground," she said, her voice steady. "Or you can bring Marcus back. Make a gesture, maybe fund a music program in his name. It's not just about him anymore. It's about Pinnacle's image." Caldwell's laugh was bitter. "Image. This is my company. I don't bow to a janitor." But his bravado was thin. The board had scheduled a vote on his leadership if the PR crisis didn't resolve by week's end. Investors were pulling back, and a major client had hinted at dropping Pinnacle. Marcus's music had become a weapon, and Caldwell was bleeding. In Harlem, the concert was taking shape. Elena had rallied a coalition of local musicians, Juilliard alumni, even a few activists who'd seen the video. They'd secured a community center for the event, set for Saturday night, just 3 days away. The plan was simple. Marcus would headline, playing a mix of classical and jazz, a testament to his journey. Posters went up around Harlem, bold letters proclaiming a night for Marcus, music over hate. Elena showed Marcus the flyer, her eyes bright with hope. "This is your stage," she said. "No one can take it from you." Marcus ran a hand over the flyer, his fingers tracing the words. He hadn't performed publicly in decades, hadn't trusted the world to hear him. But the video, the support, the fire in Elena's voice stirred something. "I'll do it," he said. "But not for them. For me. For everyone who never got a chance." Ray clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the Marcus I remember," he said. "Let's make it loud." By Friday, the concert was the talk of the city. Local news covered it, framing Marcus as a symbol of resilience. A few outlets reached out to Pinnacle for comment, but Caldwell's team stayed silent, hoping the story would fade. It didn't. The community center was already sold out, with a wait list stretching into the hundreds. Musicians volunteered to join Marcus, drummers, saxophonists, a young cellist who'd seen the video and cried. The event was becoming more than a concert. It was a movement. Caldwell, meanwhile, was cornered. The board demanded action, and Claire's latest report was grim. Pinnacle's social media was flooded with calls for a boycott. A rival company had even tweeted, "We'd hire Marcus in a heartbeat." Caldwell's pride warred with his pragmatism. He called Claire into his office, his voice low. "Set up a meeting with him," he said. "But not here. Somewhere private. I want this handled quietly." Claire nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She'd been following the concert plans, quietly impressed by the groundswell. She'd also found an old cassette in Pinnacle's Archivisa recording of Marcus playing at a company event years ago, before Caldwell's time. The music was haunting, undeniable. She hadn't shown it to Caldwell. Not yet. On Saturday morning, Marcus met Caldwell at a discreet coffee shop in Midtown. The CEO was all charm, his suit impeccable, his smile practiced. "Marcus," he said, extending a hand. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." Marcus shook his hand, his grip firm but neutral. "You could say that," he replied, his voice calm. He sat across from Caldwell, his gray jacket a stark contrast to the CEO's tailored luxury. Caldwell leaned forward, his tone conciliatory. "I'm prepared to offer you your job back, with a raise, and a chance to perform at our next gala. We'll call it a fresh start." Marcus's eyes didn't waver. "A fresh start," he repeated, as if testing the words. "You think that's what this is about?" Caldwell's smile faltered. "Look, I'm trying to make this right. The public's blowing this out of proportion. You play. We move on. Everyone wins." Marcus leaned back, his hands folded. "You don't get it, do you?" he said. "This isn't about a job or a gala. It's about respect. You mocked me, tried to break me, because of who you think I am. But I'm not your janitor. I'm Marcus Tate. And I don't need your stage to prove it." Caldwell's face hardened, but before he could respond, Marcus stood. "I've got a concert tonight," he said. "You're welcome to come. Might learn something." He walked out, leaving Caldwell staring at an empty chair. That night, the community center was alive with anticipation. The crowd was diverse Harlem locals, music students, activists, even a few Pinnacle employees who'd slipped away from work. Elena opened the concert, her violin singing a fiery rendition of Vivaldi that set the tone. Then Marcus took the stage, his presence quiet but commanding. He wore a simple black shirt, no tie, no pretense. The piano waited, a modest upright that felt like an old friend. He began with Chopin, the same nocturne from the gala, But this time it was different, freer, bolder, laced with jazz riffs that made the crowd lean forward. Each note was a story, a life laid bare. The audience was silent, then roaring, their applause a wave that crashed over him. Marcus didn't smile, didn't bow. He just played, his hands telling the truth. Back at Pinnacle, Caldwell watched a live stream of the concert on Claire's tablet, his face unreadable. The board had issued an ultimatum: resolve this or step down. He turned to Claire, his voice low. "Get me to that concert," he said. "Now." The community center in Harlem pulsed with energy, its modest stage transformed into a beacon of defiance and hope. Marcus Tate sat at the upright piano, his fingers weaving a tapestry of sound that held the crowd captive. The Chopin nocturne had given way to a medley jazz, blues, a hint of gospel, each note a piece of his soul laid bare. The audience, packed shoulder to shoulder, swayed and clapped, their faces alight with awe. This wasn't just a concert. It was a reckoning, a man reclaiming his voice in a world that had tried to silence him. Outside, Ethan Caldwell's sleek black car pulled up, its engine humming against the gritty backdrop of the street. He stepped out, his tailored coat out of place among the murals and bodegas. Claire followed, her tablet clutched tightly, her expression a mix of caution and curiosity. Caldwell hadn't spoken during the drive, his mind churning. The board's ultimatum: resolve the crisis or lose his position, had forced his hand. But he wasn't here to surrender. He was here to control the narrative, to turn Marcus's moment into Pinnacle's redemption. Inside, Marcus transitioned into a new piece, a composition of his own, a slow, haunting melody that spoke of Harlem nights and unspoken dreams. Elena stood nearby, her violin at rest, watching him with a reverence she hadn't felt since her own Juilliard days. The crowd included faces Marcus recognized: Ray, the music shop owner, nodding from the front row; Jamal, the maintenance worker, filming with his phone; even a few old jazz buddies from the 90s, their eyes shining with pride. This was their stage, too. As Marcus's piece reached its climax, the doors at the back creaked open. Caldwell slipped in, his presence drawing whispers from those who recognized him. He stood in the shadows, his arms crossed, his face a mask of calculation. Claire lingered beside him, her gaze flickering between Marcus and her boss. She'd seen the cassette, heard the old recordings of Marcus's genius. She knew what was at stake, not just for Caldwell, but for the truth. Marcus finished, the final note hanging in the air like a prayer. The crowd erupted, a wave of applause that shook the rafters. He stood, his breath steady, and faced them. "This isn't about me," he said, his voice carrying over the noise. "It's about all of us. The ones who get told to stay small, to stay quiet. Keep playing. Keep fighting." The words were simple, but they landed like a spark in dry grass. The crowd roared louder, some standing, others wiping tears. Caldwell stepped forward, his claps slow and deliberate, cutting through the din. Heads turned, the mood shifting from triumph to tension. "Well said, Mr. Tate," he called, his voice smooth but edged. "Mind if I say a few words?" The crowd murmured, uncertain. Marcus met his gaze, his expression unreadable, and nodded. Caldwell took the stage, his charm dialed to maximum. "I owe you an apology," he said, addressing both Marcus and the audience. "What happened at the gala was a misunderstanding. Pinnacle values talent, no matter where it comes from. Marcus, we want you back not as a janitor, but as a performer. And we're launching a music scholarship in your name, to ensure others like you get their chance." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some clapped, others whispered skeptically. Marcus stood still, his hands in his pockets. He saw the play for what it was, a calculated move to save face. Not a gesture of respect. But he also saw the opportunity. Not for himself, but for others. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "But I don't need your job or your scholarship. I've got my music, and I've got this." He gestured to the crowd, to the community center, to the people who'd shown up for him. "You can't buy that." The words hit like a thunderclap. The crowd roared again, louder this time, their support a wall Caldwell couldn't breach. His smile froze, his eyes narrowing. He'd underestimated Marcus again, and this time, the whole world was watching. X was already lighting up with clips of the exchange. The hashtag #MarcusSpeaks trending higher than ever. Caldwell stepped back, his charm cracking. "You're making a mistake," he said, low enough for only Marcus to hear. But Marcus didn't respond. He turned back to the piano, sat down, and began to play a fast, fiery jazz riff that set the room alight. The crowd surged to their feet, clapping in rhythm, their voices rising in a chant. "Marcus! Marcus!" Elena joined in, her violin weaving into his melody, a duet that felt like a declaration of war. Ray grabbed a drum from the corner, adding a beat that shook the floor. The music was a rebellion, a celebration, a middle finger to every door that had ever been slammed in their faces. Caldwell slipped out, Claire trailing behind. In the car, he stared out the window, his silence heavy. "He won't last," he muttered. "This is a stunt. It'll fade." Claire didn't respond. She was watching her tablet, where the live stream's view count climbed into the millions. She thought of the cassette, still hidden in her bag. She'd make sure it found the right hands, maybe a journalist, maybe a producer. Marcus's story wasn't over. Back at the community center, the concert stretched into the night. Marcus played until his hands ached, each piece a chapter of his life. The crowd stayed, unwilling to let the moment end. When he finally stood, bowing slightly, the applause was deafening. Elena hugged him, her eyes wet. "You did it," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "We did it," he said. He looked out at the faces, black, white, young, old, all united by the music. For the first time in years, he felt whole. The next morning, Pinnacle's board convened. Caldwell's absence was conspicuous, called in sick, a rare crack in his armor. The board voted unanimously to reinstate Marcus, with or without Caldwell's approval. They also greenlit the scholarship, but with a twist: it would be run by a community panel, not Pinnacle's executives. Margaret, the silver-haired director, smiled as she signed the motion. "This is bigger than us," she said. Marcus, back in Harlem, didn't know about the board's decision. He was at Ray's shop, tuning a piano for a kid's music class. His hands moved with the same care they'd shown at the gala, at the concert, in every moment of his life. He didn't need Pinnacle's stage. He'd built his own. The Harlem sun rose sharp and golden, casting long shadows across the community center where Marcus Tate's concert had shaken the city. The air still hummed with the echo of his music, a melody that had transcended the stage and seeped into the streets. Marcus was back at Ray's music shop, his hands steady as he polished an old trumpet for a young student. The world had changed overnight. His name was on every newsstand, his face on every screen, but he was still Marcus, the man who played from the soul. At Pinnacle Enterprises, the fallout was seismic. Ethan Caldwell's office was eerily quiet, his desk cleared of its usual chaos. He'd taken a leave of absence, the board's polite way of sidelining him while they navigated the PR storm. The viral clips of Marcus's concert, especially his rejection of Caldwell's offer, had painted Pinnacle as a symbol of corporate arrogance. The board's decision to reinstate Marcus and fund a community-run scholarship was a desperate bid to salvage their image. But it was too late to undo the narrative. Marcus had become a hero, not just in Harlem, but across the country. Claire, now acting as interim liaison with the board, sat in her office, the old cassette of Marcus's performance in her hand. She'd leaked it to a music journalist, who'd paired it with the gala video to tell the story of a genius silenced by prejudice. The article, published that morning, was trending on X, with thousands sharing Marcus's music and demanding accountability from Pinnacle. Claire felt a quiet satisfaction she'd played her part, small but deliberate, in amplifying Marcus's truth. In Harlem, Marcus was unaware of the article or the board's decision. He was focused on the present, teaching a group of kids at the community center how to read sheet music. Their laughter filled the room, a counterpoint to the weight of the past week. Elena dropped by, her violin case slung over her shoulder. "You're famous now," she said, half teasing, showing him her phone. The screen glowed with posts. "Marcus Tate is proof talent can't be buried. Pinnacle owes him more than an apology." Marcus shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "Fame's just noise," he said. "This," he gestured to the kids, their pencils scribbling notes, "this is real." But the world wouldn't let him stay quiet. By noon, a producer from a national talk show had tracked him down, offering a platform to tell his story. Ray, ever the protector, fielded the call. "He'll think about it," Ray said, glancing at Marcus. "But he's not here for your cameras. He's here for the music." That afternoon, a letter arrived from Pinnacle, hand-delivered by Margaret, the silver-haired board member. She found Marcus at the community center, sitting at the upright piano. "Mr. Tate," she said, her voice warm but formal. "We've reinstated your position, effective immediately. No conditions. And the scholarship it's yours to shape, through the community, not us." Marcus looked at the letter, its crisp paper a stark contrast to the worn wood of the piano. "I appreciate it," he said, "but I'm not coming back. That place isn't my home." He paused, his eyes steady. "The scholarship, though I'll make sure it helps kids who need it. Kids like I was." Margaret nodded, respect in her gaze. "You've changed things, Marcus. More than you know." She left, and Marcus turned back to the piano, his fingers brushing the keys. He didn't need Pinnacle's validation. He'd found something better himself. The scholarship took shape quickly, named the Tate Fund by the community panel. It would support young musicians from underserved neighborhoods, with Marcus as an advisor, not a figurehead. Elena volunteered to teach, and Ray offered his shop as a practice space. The first recipients were chosen within weeks: a drummer from the Bronx, a violinist from Bed-Stuy, a pianist from Harlem who reminded Marcus of himself at 15. Caldwell, meanwhile, was fading from view. Rumors swirled on X about his resignation, though Pinnacle stayed silent. He'd retreated to a vacation home in the Hamptons, licking his wounds as the board moved on without him. The company issued a public apology, acknowledging errors in judgment and pledging to review its workplace policies. It was a hollow gesture to many, but it marked a shift. Pinnacle was no longer untouchable. Marcus's story spread beyond New York. Music schools invited him to speak. Festivals offered him stages. He accepted a few, always insisting on bringing other musicians: Elena, Ray, the kids from the community center. Each performance was a reminder: talent wasn't bound by status or skin. It was human, universal, unstoppable. One evening, weeks later, Marcus played at a small Harlem jazz club, the same one where he'd cut his teeth decades ago. The crowd was intimate, the air thick with cigarette smoke and memory. He played a new piece, a blend of classical and jazz that felt like a conversation with his younger self. Elena joined him, her violin soaring, and Ray kept time on the drums. The kids from the community center watched from the front row, their eyes wide with dreams. As the final note faded, the crowd stood, their applause a warm embrace. Marcus looked out at them, friends, strangers, a community that had carried him through. He thought of Caldwell, of the gala, of the years spent invisible. None of it mattered now. He'd played his truth, and the world had listened. Later, as he walked home through Harlem streets, the city felt different, brighter, lighter. A kid on a stoop strummed a guitar, the notes raw but honest. Marcus stopped, listening, and smiled. He didn't need to be a symbol or a star. He was Marcus Tate, and that was enough. The stars above glittered, and somewhere, Chopin's Nocturne played in his mind, a reminder of the night that changed everything. He kept walking, his step steady, his heart full. The music would always be there, and so would he.